The gamer's advocate is creating another companion tier list. What makes them think they are qualified for such a responsibility? Intelligence reports that Legion has less than 50 hours playing Mass Effect. We can't trust the fate of the galaxy to people with names like AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. I heard they gave Liara a B ranking. Seriously, a B. Liara is a bloody icon. I guess we will have to express our frustration in the comments and let them know how unfit they are in their Discord. How will they rank someone as amazing and intelligent as, well, myself? Let's hope they don't screw this one up.
The writers, when they did that, had an alignment code for these companions. Mm-hmm. We just don't know what they are.
I think Banana already told us what Commander Shepard's one was. Chaotic Horny.
I don't know if that's Shepard's or just everyone who's played a BioWare game.
So we've already discussed the Mass Effect 1 companions in pretty good detail, I think. Now we're going to go into Mass Effect 2. And the first person you run into for Mass Effect 2 and does become your companion is Jacob. And Jacob is, unfortunately, he's a bit dry. You know, there's nothing too great about him. He does at least give us some information of how we got where we are, who we are, maybe what happened to our squad mates. I mean, he's definitely a Cerberus employee. It's not that he's pro-Cerberus. He doesn't agree with a lot of stuff that they've done, but at the same time, he went from Alliance to go to Cerberus, not because he wanted to make a difference. You really just kind of get the impression that he could advance more in a Cerberus uniform than he could have as an Alliance. So there's a lot to not really be to have too much alignment with Jacob, even when you know his full arc.
I would suggest from my side, I get the impression that Jacob, and it's very similar to you, I get the impression Jacob is more of a company man than anything else. I get the impression that he knows who signs the checks, really, above all else. And that's not a very interesting character. There's nothing to grab onto. If there's passion, he doesn't show it. And I feel that this is just inherently quite dull. Sadly, he doesn't offer anything to get your hands into. Rex, even Liara, Tali, they always have something that's interesting about them. Something that when you have that first conversation, you already think, where's this going? Whereas Jacob, it feels just a bit like the guy in the office who doesn't really talk to anyone. He comes in, he does his job, he goes home. He's not that happy to be there. He's not that unhappy to be there. He's almost certainly not going to change employer anytime soon. That's Jacob to me.
Yeah, I feel like Jacob falls into that category we kind of created when discussing Caden, of the jack of all trades, not so much in his combat role, but in his personality. He's pretty average. He's uninteresting because he kind of seems in control of his emotions. He doesn't have a great deal of passion in any one direction. He's just very much a kind of boring pragmatist who follows orders. And there's not a lot to latch on there. There's not a lot to dig into. You can learn more about him and his backstory through his loyalty mission, but even then, it's not a tremendously engaging story.
I felt like there was something there in the loyalty mission. I felt like they weren't far off. They had the ingredients for an interesting story. They just didn't hit something. I don't know if it was the way it was played. I don't know if it was the performances. I couldn't really pick anything up, but it just didn't catch me. Whilst I kept thinking, you're so close. You're so close to giving me something.
I think what happened there, and this is me looking at it from a writer's point of view, you have to make him not like his father. He can't be put into a image of like, my father may have had a point. Despite everything, all that being said, he helped them live longer by, giving them the food and making sacrifices and making sure that the officers were not fed the food that was going to make people deranged and unable to control their own minds. But then, they did manipulate the situation. And if Jacob was apologetic for that in any way, I think that almost might make a better character, because then you'd have to fight him on that. But you're never fighting him because he's always taking the road of, no, what my dad did was disgusting, and you agree. There's really no renegade option here. I mean, outside of just, killing his father. But I think that the writers painted themselves in a corner that they could not give him any alternative of having an ability, because if he did, there's no story there anymore because you have to kill him. It'd be the Rex situation without the dynamic of having a Rex,
Things that I were going to add, and it feels like a bit of a pile-on, but I'm afraid there's just not a huge amount that he has going for him. And I should stress, it's not really anything that I hate about Jacob, sorry. He just leaves me very cold. I just find
already forgotten his name.
Yeah, the good start, yeah.
He's so much like Caden that I called him Caden.
Yeah. The problem with him, he leaves me cold. He leaves me uninterested. But there's a few things that stand out that I remember, and none of them are positive. One is combat. I'm never taking him. He doesn't do anything that makes him stand out, nothing that makes him special. There's always someone else who does better what he does. It's a bad start. In between games, what does he do? In between 2 and 3, Garrus goes off and does his thing. Suddenly he's high up in the rankings. Tally goes and gets herself taken seriously. Miranda, she's got her whole story. I'm not going to go into it too much because we'll get onto Miranda a little bit later. Thane's got a story. Jacob pisses off. Just goes on vacation, I think.
Well, he becomes a security officer for a Cerberus science team that has decided to not be part of the Elusive Man's program anymore. But my point here is that he still continues to do the same thing he was doing. Yeah. He's just saying, you know what, I see the scientist side now. Well, wait a minute. We exposed everything for you. You couldn't make that decision back then?
Yeah, there was no growth. If anything, he regresses. Mm-hmm. And the only other one is I feel like, and this stands out, he's the one pushing to go through the relay earlier in the game It's bad advice. He is the thing that sticks out for me is he offers you bad advice. So your bad advice, you're uninspiring, you don't grow, you don't change, and you're useless in combat.
I will remind everybody that loves Tally, he did not need to make that comment saying, be sure to talk to our AI. He knows Quarians. He knows their history. What does he say? As Tally's walking out the door, he says, oh, make sure you introduce yourself to our AI, Edie. And Tally just kind of gives a look to the side and then doesn't say anything, walks off. He didn't have to say that.
So he's a dick as well.
He's a dick.
I think that lack of growth is probably the biggest one for me. Is you're presented with Jacob, and I want to say Jacob is a terrible character for a story, but probably a decent person to hang out with because he's not tragically flawed in any way. He's not presented to you as somebody who needs to grow. He's kind of presented as somebody who's got it pretty much figured out, and he's not going to take any major risks because he knows where his priorities are, and he's not in a position where his priorities are overcoming some tremendous injustice or anything along those lines. He's basically working towards your goal, which is counteracting the Reapers.
Could we refer to him by the thing that you would find great in real life? It's almost the curse of the character, which is he's competent.
Yeah. And that's not a story. That's a destination. That's an end point. Yeah. I don't need characters who are endpoints introduced to me.
I think it feels like we know where we stand on Caden.
Right. Not Caden.
Caden! Jacob.
Yeah.
Oh, la la.
Yeah. I will say that also if you romance Jacob, if you do make that commitment to him, he doesn't do the same for you in 3. He's with somebody else by then.
And not that long later.
Yeah. No. So, I mean...
Well, we've established he's a dick.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things going against him. I will say, too, I think it would have been more interesting. They built all this character for Jacob, but if Miranda, when you first see that she, kills the science officer, if she also killed Jacob, if she shot him right then and there, and then it's just you and Miranda to decide to leave, or are we going to be confrontational too?
Oh yeah, that would be a much bigger decision in that moment. Because Jacob is there to kind of stand up for her, you give her much more leeway with that decision. But if she kills both of the people who you've been working with to escape this facility, there's a lot of gray area there, a lot of ways that you can convince yourself that Miranda can't be trusted.
Yeah. And then if you find out that Miranda had actually been a love interest of Jacob in the past, they're clearly not together anymore, then there's a lot of questions you have about Miranda. So that's where he becomes interesting.
like
if they had killed him,
probably not a great sign that our argument in favor of Jacob is he would have been more interesting if he were dead.
Yeah.
If he got the Jenkins treatment, then he would. Yeah. But I'm serious. I mean, I think from a storytelling standpoint, I think it would have worked, and they would have used that extra time and resources to put somewhere else, some other person. Less is more. So I call him a D because he is helpful to get through the story, but you don't even use him as a specialist in any of the missions that would allow him to survive at the end. So you could send him through the ducks, I guess, if he doesn't make it. He doesn't make it.
Oh, what a pity.
But yeah, no, I don't even think he survives.
But you're definitely not bringing him along with you in those moments where you choose your squad.
Right. I always use Morden. I've always used Morden for the sending with the scientists back and the crew back to the Normandy. I don't even think Jacob lives that one. He should, but I don't think he does. I'd have to look that one up.
I think that's Morden and Miranda. I think those are your surviving options.
You have more flexibility on that decision.
I was furious when Zaid got killed doing that.
Yeah.
I thought he could have handled it.
Yeah. Zaid is a strong character. But so I have Jacob. Almost called him Caden. You got me doing it.
Yeah, boy.
The idea that none of us could get his name right is not helping him.
D. I have him as a D because, like I said, he is capable and I can use him if I needed to.
This is all relative to each other. So this isn't saying in the grand standards of video games across time and space. He's an F. Purely in comparison to everyone else, I think he stands out as the weakest character. And if you have to have F as the weakest, it's him.
So we're not even considering E. We're just going straight to F.
Straight to F.
Oh, I don't even have an E in my personal tier list. I just got rid of it because I don't think we need that precision for this. I have
F.
I have him as an F.
Okay.
I feel like he genuinely brings nothing to Mass Effect 2 or 3. I feel like if Jacob wasn't there, never introduced, I don't know that my experience would be all that different.
Yeah, this is one of those where I kind of wish we had a fourth because 2 Fs and a D.
Well, if you don't have an E tier, that's an F.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that it pulls it down. So I guess we could go with an F. And I'm okay with that. It's fine, you know.
Oh, I think E is fairer, honestly. I think we've established the precedent so far that if we have 2 on A, 1 on C, it's a B. I think we have to have Jacob fall on an E.
You don't necessarily have to have an F to define what an A or an S is, but I mean...
I think about relative to each other, we're saying if there's something in the gap.
Well, we'll move on. We won't spend too much more time on Jacob. I mean, Caden 2.0. I mean, whatever. Wish.com Caden. Yeah. Miranda is the next person that you meet that's a true companion. Man, what can I say about Miranda? There's so much. Her presentation to you at the very beginning, you don't know what to make of her. She's clearly the one who's been spending the most amount of time and has of her own time to not just advance herself, but also to actually, she's committed to the project. There's no question about that. You get early on, you get the impression of who Miranda really is because she wanted to install a behavior chip in Shepard. And the Elusive Man did not want anything to interfere with Shepard being Shep. So Miranda is definitely more on the controlling side, and she doesn't always react well when she doesn't have full control. She can work with it, obviously, but it's not her ability to be versatile. But that's what makes her interesting, because she becomes extremely versatile and capable on her own without needing the other resources like some of the other companions would. I really think that there's a lot there with Miranda that is pretty clear and apparent. When you dig a little bit further, she's even more interesting. So I definitely give her an A. I think she's a really great character.
I was initially very underwhelmed in the first few minutes when you meet her. And the very first conversation that you have with her on board the Normandy, I remember having very much the opinion that she was going to slide down, pardon the extremely on-the-nose expression, that sort of Jacob's ladder. They were going to turn out to be very, very similar characters. Let's go with a very similar feel and arc, and I felt like they both had that cold demeanor to begin with. She had something a bit more going on beneath the surface, a bit more tetchy. Like, she was on edge, she was a bit closer to having an outburst of some kind, and you get to see a whole bunch of those as the game goes on. But the way that her facade cracks is beautiful, and I don't mean that as an attack on her, I mean the way she lets the walls down. She is this person made to be perfect, very literally. In that sense that I should dislike her in the way that I dislike Liara, or that aspect of her. For me, I think it turns out in her case to be very much a positive because of the way that she begins with this very stoic demeanor, very all business, and that just slides away. And you begin to see that she actually is flawed. And when you see, certainly emotionally, and when you see her family brought into the game as we go further and further, she really moves very highly up my list of characters that I like. And she will also get the added bonus that I use her a lot in combat. Particularly in late game Mass Effect 2, I always felt I could rely on her, so she would go really quite high up my rankings very quickly. I won't call her letter yet because I'm not quite sure, but she's nowhere near down in that lower half. Not even close.
I want to disagree with you so much on your relationship between Liara and Miranda, because they are very, very similar characters. And Miranda has all of those advantages that you said Liara does. She's physiologically better than other people. And weirdly, you love Miranda for that.
Yep.
And hate Liara for it. Whereas I am the exact opposite, because I see all of those advantages that Liara has, and I also see Liara push those away and just choose her own path. Whereas with Miranda, she absolutely embraces those. She's bitter about the way she obtained them, but she's not going to forego her advantages because of the way they were obtained. And for that reason, I dislike her so much more than Liara. But she is a very interesting character because you're presented with that disconnect where she is genetically perfect and her personal life is so messed up that it doesn't really matter. She has all of these advantages, but she's also damaged, and that damage could overwhelm all of those advantages in a moment, which makes her tremendously interesting. So as much as I dislike her in terms of her personality, she's a very interesting character. And as you said, she's tremendously capable in combat. She is a critical element of making your way through Mass Effect 2. So for me, I have her in a B tier because she's very interesting. I don't like her, but she's also very capable.
That's something that I would actually really be careful to clarify on as well from my perspective, is I think if I knew this person in real life, I would find them absolutely insufferable. I would want no part to do with them in any way.
It's the exact opposite of Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob would be fine. You're not going to have the best night out with him, but he's not going to go punch anyone. You know, it's going to be a quiet couple of drinks together.
He'd probably have your back. You know, if I got into like a scuffle or something, he would probably like, hey, you know.
Yeah. And you could imagine him being like the negotiator, the peacemaker if need be, and if not, he's there, he's got your back. Miranda, she's flipping tables before anyone even, you know, starts talking. But I think she's really looked at in an odd way sometimes. When I used to read more about Mass Effect, I often heard people describe her as this tragic character. I don't think she's tragic.
Mm-mm.
I think there are characters in Mass Effect 2 to whom that could be applied. I'm thinking another Biotic for one. But I'm not sure that it really applies to Miranda.
Her ability to, at the end of Mass Effect 2, she's seen everything. She doesn't need to be convinced anymore. Cerberus is bad. She quits on the spot.
Oh, that moment
Mhm.
is as satisfying a character conclusion. It's not her conclusion, but as satisfying the closing to an arc as any other. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. So she is already turning that page, and she does so very convincingly, and she doesn't need anybody to tell her that she's right or wrong. She's going to make her own decision anyway. So Shep meeting up with her again in 3 is a very interesting arc on its own, not because of just the storyline. They didn't need to give her a storyline, but they did because it actually lends more information about the bigger world in general, because her father was helping the elusive man create those artificial husks. You know, he's trying to recreate what the Reapers do.
I just think that that kind of revelation where she finally recognizes Cerberus for what it is tremendously satisfying, but it's that satisfying of, I've spent years trying to convince somebody of something that I know is true, and for years they have adamantly defended it and ignored all of the evidence to the contrary. And when they finally do accept reality, it's almost not as satisfying as it could have been, because it was all there in front of them from the beginning and they chose not to see it. And now they don't have a choice, and that's the only way they were going to see it.
Well, they have a choice. Jacob chose to still choose Cerberus.
Yeah, but Jacob's an idiot.
Yeah, we're not going to use him as the bar for where you should be.
Jacob's personality is following orders. That's all he has going for him, is doing what he's told. Jacob is kind of that I do what I have to survive kind of person. Like, I'm just getting through. Miranda has these principles, and at the very beginning you're presented to her and she wants to control you. She wants to be in charge. And by the end, she realizes, I wanted to be in charge in an organization I no longer believe in. And there's not enough of a fall there for me to say she's really seen the tragedy of her behavior.
I think the thing that I find thoroughly engaging, and it's again another thing where if I knew her, it would be awful. But as a character in a narrative, I find thoroughly wonderful, is she really doesn't hold Shepard in the way that everyone else almost seems to. Everyone else is always, you get the feeling, that they're looking up at Shepard, or they've got their rose-tinted glasses on. She's much more, I'm not going to say pragmatic or neutral. There's much more of an antagonistic relationship between the two. Or it's quite one-directional, to be honest. But she has that. And then you combine that where she can see all through the game, and ideally before the game, because I'd like to think she's not an idiot, the evidence mounting up that Cerberus might not be great. But she can't quite jump to that conclusion, because she's going to first of all have to jump to the conclusion that she has done everything wrong. Ultimately, she's been fighting on the wrong side for goodness knows how long, and she has to overcome this antagonism that she has with Shepard. So when she has that moment where she essentially tells the elusive man to go away, to screw off, she's overcoming two different things. It's the antagonism towards Shepard and her role in the organization. I think for me, that's what I really liked about it, was those two things just coming together into that one big moment. I agree with you. It's not necessarily enough in and of itself, and I could see how you could find it not to be enough, but for me, it just about hit right.
I think if they had written her with like her romance arc being much more transformative, it would be a little different. But she sees you as an equal, whether you romance her or not. So, you know, if you're in the world doing Shepard things, I mean, she thinks of you as her equal. I mean, she's very self-confident. It's not a bad thing.
I think one of my frustrations with the character, and I go back and forth on this tier list because we're evaluating them as a character, and characters have to be interesting, and interesting doesn't mean good. So if I don't like the character, that doesn't mean they're a bad character. It just means I don't like that person. So I kind of let my frustrations with Miranda color where she falls in this tier list, but she's very interesting. But one of the reasons that I so easily fall into that I don't like her frame of reference is when you meet Liara, she's in danger and you save her. And there's that little bit of reticence to say, what is his motivation? Why is he saving me? I'm not so naive that I think this is purely a heroic person. But she does recognize you as being a bit of a hero. When Miranda meets you, she is aware of everything you did in Mass Effect 1. She doesn't see you as a hero. She sees you as a tool to achieve her goals. And that is immediately a problem for me. Miranda is everything that you hate about the Asari, but she's a human. And I hate her. But she's tremendously interesting because of it. So as far as storytelling goes, she's spectacular.
Yes, to be clear, my love of her character is not my love of her personality. Very much not. I think she's one of the ones who, at her worst, is borderline reprehensible. When she's at her worst, she can have a much better arc, she can come out much more satisfying, but her earliest days, I think it was you, Banana, who said about the control chip that they wanted. That was Legion. That's vile. That is another level of vile that goes beyond the Asari, which is already quite bad. The coercion that they have. This is literally on a biological, fundamental level, stealing who you are. And she didn't say that's wrong. It's that instant fundamental moral failing. Yeah, when she's at her worst, she's repulsive.
This is really shocking because in this scenario, Banana's consistent. He is aliens, maybe first. Well, humans sometimes. Kama is definitely humans first, aliens second. I mean, because he's saying the same argument for the Asari or Liara, and yet Liara's down here and Miranda's up here. So
I haven't told you my ranking yet.
Okay. Well, we're waiting.
You've told us all of the data that led you to the conclusion without telling us the conclusion.
Yup.
It's not a huge reveal.
All right, then I'll give you my letter. Miranda gets a B.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Again, as a person, especially at the beginning, she gets an F. As she goes on, she really improves, but I think there's enough in her to be interesting. It's... Yeah, I don't have a huge amount of counter-arguments for her, but there's not much that pushes me into loving her character.
Oh, yeah.
She's well done, pretty much across the board. I found it... I find her interesting, I don't find her fascinating. I find her well done, I don't think it's brilliant.
Man, I give her an A because of I do think that she has a different arc depending on how you interact with her. Like, for instance, like if you do romance her, you don't see that much in these characters. I mean, they're kind of one way or the other because you don't have a ton of romance options. Like Tally's the same Tally no matter what, which is a good thing because Tally by herself is fine. That's all I need. I don't need Tally to be different than what she is. Regardless of your interaction with her. But Miranda does change. She becomes a little bit more malleable, and I don't mean that in a really wicked way. I just mean that she is open. She's open-minded finally, whereas before she couldn't.
She embraces a small amount of doubt finally.
Which someone like her who has her genetic profile and is used to overcoming everything without, she's been playing life on easy mode, not necessarily, yes, from a financial standpoint, but she's already shown that she's pulled away from that. Cerberus saw her talents and brought her in, so she's never been without, but she has been making her way through her own means. But again, that's why I give her an A, because of the diversity of the amount of type of character that she can become. But I don't disagree with the B at all. I mean, I think that's where she lands, because you gave her a B too, right, Banana?
I haven't actually given my rating.
Yeah, I didn't think you did. Yeah.
So for me, I have her in a
B2.
I actually do give her a B though. I would have put her much lower if not for the fact that she's tremendously interesting. I think as far as storytelling goes, she's an excellent character. But if you look at the characters we've put in S tier, they are interesting and beloved. And Miranda will never be beloved for me. I hate her.
I think you've actually hit that
so
perfectly.
interesting.
Yeah, you need to hit that sweet spot. Unless you are exceptionally, uniquely interesting, then maybe you can lose a few points in how beloved you are and still hit that S. But you've got to completely excel. But I think across the board we've seen so far, those really hitting the high marks. We love the character, but we also just kind of love them.
I mean, I love her outfit. You know, the optional one, the alternate one, not the...
Is that the black one?
Yeah, the black one, yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I know.
Black one.
Yeah. Should have been the default
they
one.
Cerberus
That doesn't
got
move her up.
Oh, slow down, boy.
We'll stay
Moves
down at the
calm.
bottom.
Then I think we're good. We got 2 Bs and an A for Miranda.
Okay, so she's a B. All right, so we're going to move on, and it's a character I thoroughly enjoy. She's never in my party. I don't ever bring this character because of my builds that I do most of the time. So I'm talking about Kasumi. So I love Kasumi. I think she's got some really unique abilities. That ability that Shadow Strike basically knocks out most enemies. And so when you're playing on a harder mode or Insanity or something, she's kind of makes it on easy mode. The problem is that you face a lot of enemies in Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 2, and her Shadow Strike does nothing. So it really depends on the enemy. But if nothing else, it does stagger them, and you can kind of get ahead of the game, because she does hit hard. She's got a great story. Her own DLC is a great story. It's one of the best ones. You have to face a Donovan Hawk who attacks you in his own helicopter thing.
And educates you on who stole the Mona Lisa.
Oh, yeah.
Which I can never remember from playthrough to playthrough, but I know that's the name of the person who stole the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, Perugia. But anyway, my point here is that I love Kasumi. I love everything about her. She's got a great story. You can't romance her, obviously, because of her. Part of her story is she's in mourning for her ex-spouse. Basically, she's still trying to. She's not looking for revenge. She's very level-headed. She's a true thief. I love her, but I can't use her because I play Infiltrator a lot. I play Engineer a lot. I can't. We kind of double down on the same abilities basically. With Kasumi, I think I want to give her a solid B, because I think she's great if you have the right build. Like if you're a soldier or something, you might give her an A, but I mean, the way I play, it's got to be a B.
I think Legion and I have a lot of similar tastes in the characters we choose to play. So Baldur's Gate, almost always a thief. I love that kind of stealth build, and for that reason I love Kasumi. I also think Kasumi's aesthetic is wonderful. The hood, the stealth, all of it just works. I think she's very well designed as a character. Her story is wonderful, and I think the fact that there isn't a romance option enhances the story, because you recognize where she is in her emotional state, and that she's never really going to move on from her partner. I think she is a tremendously well done character, but there's just not enough for her to be elevated to an S tier. So for me, she's an A, because I love everything about the character. And if you're stubborn, you can force her into your party when her abilities don't really enhance the party too much. And they're fun. They're just fun in combat. But I don't think she hits that S tier because you don't get enough. I think she has her story, she has her closure, and then she kind of falls away.
I feel like I'm going to disappoint you because I'm not a fan of Kasumi at all. I think for me, there's one thing that I do very much like, so I'll go there first. I think she's incredibly useful, if anyone's ever tried, in the final battle of Mass Effect 2. She is outstanding. I don't think there's anyone better than her at that, which oddly enough, bearing in mind how damn near useless she is for most of the tasks that don't involve her being in the party, it's the perfect place for her. She's outstanding in that final battle. And I do love that attack, the Shadow Strike. It's just vicious. I don't think anything hits harder than that in the whole game, or if it does, I'll be surprised.
It would be Warp with Shockwave, probably. Be the only other.
Yeah.
Yeah, combination.
But yeah, there you go. So if we think of it in that very simplistic way, we need to put 2 attacks together to match what she can do on her own. Like that, she's astounding. The great problem I have with Kitsune is really twofold. I think part of it comes from Mass Effect 3, where she's in the Citadel DLC, and she comes across as a creep. It's distinctly unpleasant. So I don't like that. That really turns me off. And weirdly enough, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong on this, but this is just my memory, so you can't really correct me. I think I never played Mass Effect 2 with her in before I had played Mass Effect 3 with the DLC. So my first impression of this person was just what a creep they are, which is obviously not a great start. And then she was really badly hurt over the course of Mass Effect 2 when I eventually got around to playing it. For also one of the things I don't like about Zaid, the impossibility of actually talking with them and having a genuine structured dialogue-free dialogue. I always feel as though she's not quite there. It's almost like she was just pasted into the ship. It's like the ship is a Final Fantasy VII background. We're getting that in you. And she's just on top of it in that one corner. There's no dialogue tree. It's just dialogue. And I felt that really built distance between me and her character, as it did for Zaid as well. It's just, I don't like that in a game where the dialogue tree system is so good. For myself, that bad introduction to her, not using her really ever outside of that one section of the game, where she's definitely useful, and a dislike to how the game approaches her her dialogue, she's low for me. She's around a D at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I think Com is referring to like at the party where she just kind of shows up in places.
Oh, she's kind of introduced in that way as well, as she is flexing that she knows things about you that you don't share. She's showing off that she has that stealth, she has that infiltration ability to find information you don't want made public. I get that in certain contexts can be very, very unsettling and problematic, and creepy is definitely a word that comes into that frame. But for me, I think it's kind of the attempt to showcase her specialty. This is what she's good at. And if you didn't have a need for that ability, it would be terrifying. But you have a need for it, and you're going there to recruit her. So her showing off the reasons why you want her didn't really rub me the wrong way, but I can imagine if I were introduced to it in the Citadel DLC as my starting point, I'd be like, ew, I don't like this.
Well, it reminds me of someone who's unobjectively a bad guy, which is the character of Translucent from The Boys. That weird creep who's just violating all kinds of personal space. It's just that. And especially in the Citadel DLC, where I found it so off-putting. And it's a bit hypocritical, because Liara's whole thing is knowing a bunch of stuff about you that you don't want the world knowing. We're just talking about different ways of dealing with it. But I think this is where the interior ickiness of the method... I nearly called it Kitsune then, who's a friend of ours.
You did that once.
Did I? Ha ha! What's her name again? I wrote it down. Hold on.
Kitsune, just for clarification, not a creep.
Yes, not a creep. Kasumi, there we go. I'm going to say that from now on. I'm just going to be pronouns. The ickiness that's within my system for just the method that they use, just it's icky. That's all. And it's a visceral, guttural reaction to that character more than anything else. And yeah, I find it incredibly off-putting. I am definitely not budging from that D.
I think if I were presented with her in that way, to say, hey, she's a problem, and then go back and play a game with her as an ally, it's like,
Wasn't she invisible in the bathroom with me? No, I'm good. I'm good.
I think we overall average a C, right? Because you said A, Banana?
I did.
Yeah, and I said B. And Com said D.
Yeah, so it's like
C.
a high C, possibly even a B.
Yeah, so we'll say C. Zaid. you get him early on, and I actually use him quite a bit in Mass Effect 2 because he's kind of like that Ash character. Not as good, not as versatile, but he's like that Ash character for me because he's a warrior. But you also get Grunt, and we haven't gotten to Grunt yet, but why would I want to use Zaid when I have Grunt? Why not both? So as an infiltrator, it actually kind of works. I don't have to work with biotics if I'm on insanity. I just need to survive. Having a combination of Zaid and Grunt with me, it's a pretty good combination, to be honest. Zaid just hits hard. And so story-wise, he's the only one that's a true renegade playthrough. And you do have a Paragon option now, and it's easier to access it now in the Legendary Edition. If I use him quite often, because you meet him early and you're able to access his abilities, if you're going to get Garrus, you're going to get Morden. I'm probably going to use Zaid because he's just so tanky. I would probably give him a C, though, after all that, because he's got no real story beyond that.
I really, really like Zaid. I'm quite a fan. I can go through sort of a few points. I've just noted them down whilst we were talking. Genuinely quite chaotic. I like that. And there's something about Zaid that for me fits perfectly into Mass Effect 2. I don't think he'd have fit in Mass Effect 1 as his character. Everyone on board is a little too much goody two-shoes for that. But Zaid, his manner, I think it fits perfectly into Mass Effect 2. It's such a shame he wasn't a base character. For me, that idea of going around recruiting this disparate, weird group of people, some of them good, some of them bad, and having them all try and come and fit together, he's almost the best embodiment of that. So for him to be DLC was such a shame, because there are people who will have played this game without having actually Zaid in the party, which is for me, that's a real letdown. I think his side mission, his loyalty, is very good. One of my real favorites. There's some beautiful moments in it, and I didn't know that about the option becoming a little easier now with the Paragon check. That's interesting. It might make it feel a bit more approachable. Like you don't have to worry about putting off his missions until later in the game, which was often something on the second or third playthrough you really had to think about. Also wrote down that I love his war stories, and they're just great fun to listen to. But again, he suffers from the fact that I can't interact with them. I want Shepard interjecting. I want Shepard responding, because Shepard must have war stories. Depending on the kind of Shepard you're playing as well, your Shepard might have been through terrible things before the events of Mass Effect 1, and I would have loved to have had almost therapy between the two of them, of this back and forth. Yeah, well, this happened to me. Yeah, well, this happened to me. And I want to have them going back and forth over and over on top of each other. I love his voice acting. I think it's one of the great performances in the game. It's absolutely astounding. The only real negative I have about Zaid, I love him in combat as well, is he's got that same problem. Kasumi. What's he called? Kasumi. Flip. He's got the same problem the spy lady has. There we go. With he doesn't feel 100% integrated into the game. He feels a little bit like he was thrown on top of it, added in, which he was. But I felt they could have done a better job with that. So he always, and this is such an arbitrary thing for him to lose points on, he never quite feels like a part of the game for me. So despite everything that I love about him, I've got him somewhere around a C right now.
His lore is locked behind a lot of conversations throughout the world. So if you go do the Garrus mission, for instance, and you bring him, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people will take Jacob and Miranda for whatever reason. Hey, play how you want to play. But if you do take Zaid with you, you'll find out he was the original leader of the Blue Suns. You don't know that unless you have that conversation, because he recognizes the people, the officers in the room. They recognize him as, Zaid, you son of a bitch, what you doing here? And he's like, how'd you get into this mess? You know you're fighting a losing battle. I mean, it's clearly banter. They know each other. But yeah, he was the original founder of the Blue Suns. It's pretty interesting.
Did you hear, Banana, by the way? That wonderful Legion saying, play the game however you want, very much with a tone that didn't say, play the game how you want.
Oh, yeah. Play it however you want. I don't care what you do.
I've heard that for years at this point. I'm not a fan of Zaid. He doesn't work for me. I think it is because I'm that boring Paragon. in every playthrough.
Yeah.
And Zaid forces you to not be a paragon. There is a stubbornness, and it's showcased in that original version of his loyalty mission, where you have to be an incredible paragon to convince him. That's not really an option in a blind playthrough. You don't know to prepare that much. So you end up either abandoning him or choosing an option that doesn't suit you. And I hated that because, again, my gameplay is always that power fantasy where I want to do what I know is right and still save everybody. And Zaid is the proof that that's not an option. And it's real. That's life. That's how it works. But it undermines my fantasy. And for that reason, I don't like him. But he is, again, a tremendously interesting character. He's very engaging, and as Com said, the voice acting is spectacular. He's wonderful in that role. I just cannot reconcile how much I dislike him as a person. And I think that other element of the way he is presented with all those war stories, when you talk to Rex and he tells you those war stories, he presents them as almost shameful events in his past. Zaid presents them as points of pride. It's kind of representing that this character is not going to grow. This is who they are. This is who they will always be. And also suggests that possibly this character is embellishing because they want you to think they're a badass. They want you to think they're the most dangerous person in the room, even knowing what you're capable of. He wants you to be a little bit scared of him. And for that reason, I just cannot give Zaid, I think, really a fair chance. I think I immediately push him away because of who I am. And for that reason, I have him at D.
I think you really hit two really interesting things, which was the idea of the repercussions if you go on his mission too early back in the old days. And you might have to do something you don't want to. Yes, that's life, but it's not this game. I think that moment, yeah, it almost doesn't chime with Mass Effect. Mass Effect has repercussions to your actions, but they're not that big, generally. The Witcher does. In The Witcher, I feel that would be so much more accepted within the universe. I've got to go on this mission, and unless I'm very lucky, I've got to make this sort of devil's choice between these two things, and I don't want to do either. And it feels right. Shepard, it feels like there's almost always a way out. And he's always going to find, or she's always going to find a way to just make things work. So yeah, it almost takes you away from, like you said, that power fantasy, which I agree with you on. And the other thing was just when you were talking about his war stories and how he's embellishing what he did. It wasn't quite the point that you were getting at, but it was something else that you kind of drew me to. He's Jacob. He's already knows who he is. He's self-assured. He's confident, within reason. It's like his growth has already taken place off camera. And we already have the finished product. And it's just the fact that he's a bit more charming and a bit more cocky and a bit more headstrong that stops us making that direct comparison, I think, between him and Jacob. Where Jacob became quite a dull person. Zaid at least is interesting. And I was just thinking it's oddly a bit hypocritical of myself that I actually quite like him. As I've shown, I am a complete hypocrite.
I think that's it. Is Jacob is presented to you complete and flawless. Zaid is presented to you complete and flawed. It makes him more interesting.
Right. And I think Com's pulling me in his direction a bit because he does remind me more of the Baldur's Gate original characters. They have their own story and they're going to pursue their own story. You're just a part of their story, not the other way around. And he lives in that vein. He has his own moral code. He may be renegade or chaotic. Here's the thing. If you do his loyalty mission and he's alive in Mass Effect 3 and you do the Citadel DLC, he is obsessing over getting this toy in this little claw game. But he doesn't care about what's in it. He gives it to the kid who's standing there. He just wants to get it. And so when he finally gets it, because he's asking Shepard for money, he's like, I don't, he probably has the money. He probably just doesn't want to go like what I did back in the mid 80s and ask for quarters, right? He doesn't want to go all the way down there. He's focused on getting the game done. So he gets money from Shepard. He finally gets the thing, gives the kid the toy. But that is Zaid. His moral code has nothing to do with his tenacity.
Yeah, I think if we did that loose Baldur's Gate alignment, he's chaotic neutral, most likely, possibly leaning towards chaotic evil. And I think that's such a good example of him with the claw game. He doesn't really care about the result. He is just entirely focused on winning the game. And when you look at his life story and what he is, he lived his entire life on, well, most of his life on mercenary contracts, where if he doesn't go and get the job done, he doesn't get paid, he doesn't eat, and he's probably not going to make the next contract. And you're just seeing this little microcosm of his character framed in the delightful context of him playing a crane game.
He goes into missions where there's probably his life is endangered at every single one of them. Yeah, that may be true for some of the other ones, but he knows that. I mean, there is a distinct, he's going up against armed people who are told to shoot on sight. And so he has all those war stories that are like when he like took down a Turian frigate, and things like that.
Yeah.
He'll give you the description of what happened. I mean, he doesn't mince words, but he's matter of fact. But that myopic point of view, and like you said, if he dies in the final mission, it makes no sense. He is a survivor.
I think that that kind of speaks to his character, that claw machine of ultimately showcasing where his priorities are. He is always focused on overcoming a challenge. And that's where all of those war stories come from. He's not afraid to approach a challenge that seems overwhelming just to prove he can beat it. And I think that is a very interesting quality. It's not an endearing one. That is somebody with a death wish. That is somebody who's constantly putting themselves in harm's way to prove how capable they are until it doesn't work out.
I think that's it. He probably doesn't care if he dies. I would imagine that he is completely and utterly haunted. If you think of everything he's done in his life, he's just a human. There's nothing else going on. He's just a human. There's no way he's held together under the surface. Which is no doubt where that ridiculously cocky, stoic demeanor comes from. The one-upping in the tales, the exaggerations, the embellishments. He is clearly broken. And he's going to go out the way that he knows. He's going to go out in the biggest gunfight he can find, fighting the biggest opponent he can find. It just so happens that rather wonderfully, he's in a timeline with the Reapers.
I think that is so that brokenness of Zaid it's not unique to him. There are a lot of broken characters in Mass Effect. And I think the way they handle it is what shapes my opinion of them. When you meet Miranda, she seems perfect. You learn her backstory and you realize she's broken. When you meet Zaid, he seems tremendously capable, put together. You learn his backstory, he's broken. There's another character that we'll discuss in a few minutes, I'm sure. You meet and they are abundantly obviously telling you, hey, I'm broken. This is who I am. It's messed up. I'm not really sure what to do with it. That is tremendously endearing to me. To say, to be that honest, to be that direct, to say, I've had trauma in the past. It's a part of who I am now. You need to be aware of this. I think the fact that Miranda and Zaid try to hide it from you, try to make it seem like they've put it behind them, that it's part of their past and won't be an issue, is problematic to me. It's why I don't like their characters.
So I think Com has moved me up to a B. And Com's saying a B, right?
I was saying C, but I've dragged myself more towards a B as well.
Yeah. So
I'm
Banana,
the least persuasive person in this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, I've really, the argument's well formed, cogent, clear. I think I've really dragged myself.
like I said,
down.
I use Zaid a lot. I think he's incredibly useful. It's its lack of story that always got me. But I think the pros are weighing the cons. So
I'm going to quickly call mine. It's a C, and it's really the big reason is that DLC feel. The way he doesn't quite feel like he's really a part of the game. It's the only thing that really pulls him down for me. However, like Banana mentioned earlier, he would never approach an S because there's too much just dislike. Too many things to dislike about the character, not how it's written, but who he is.
And it's
So I
funny,
end
if
up on
they
a-
gave him a romance arc, I'd probably think less of him because he caved.
I think a romance arc would feel
I'd love that.
awful.
Oh,
I would hate that idea.
I mean,
'Cause-
that's ending badly.
We've talked about it. He has a death wish. I don't want to romance somebody who is seeking out their own death.
Shep's not that different.
Shep has a goal that he knows is dangerous.
It's called the suicide mission. And he's taking
and
everybody
how many
with him.
people survived?
Right. But you're taking everybody with you. You're convincing them.
You could sum up the potential romance, the sex life, and Zaid's approach to life with the same phrase, which is just, if we're going down together. If we're going down,
we're going down together.
So you give him a 69 out of 100. This is not that kind of tier.
Which, by the way, that's a D.
I think you find that's I play as male Shep. It's 2Ds.
I say B. Com says C. What is Banana saying?
D.
Okay, so then it's a C. Since we've already covered Garrus, and we're not going to cover him again, you go to Omega, you get Garrus there, and you run into Arya. The other person that you can collect while you're there, you probably going to be most people's first companion mission, probably going to be Morden, because you're advised to go get him first by the elusive man. Arya kind of alludes to that would be a good idea.
Can I have a Morden moment? I'm going to give Morden an F.
Morden an F.
There's a plague going on where he's at, so you almost feel like an impetus to, you got to do something about that.
His mission's just easier.
Yeah, like it seems like something that really needs to be done first. I mean, that plague you don't know anything, so as far as you know, it could get out. Well, then you find out, of course, that it's being quarantined and whatnot, and then humans are not affected. So actually, it's a really interesting, because if you go get Garrus first, everybody you have up to this point are all human, except for Garrus. So you actually, like I said, there's a lot of signs that say, go do this one first. But if you do bring Garrus, he has a little comment like, well, I'll follow you. Not happy about it, but
Classic Garrus.
but yeah, classic Garrus. But that's kind of what my point here is, that it's affecting only humans. And by then, like I said, the story's trying to guide you to go get Morden first, because your first party should just be all humans, either Jacob and Zaid or Miranda. But yeah, Morden is really great character. He Solarian STG former person who's been adapting the genophage. I think a lot of people get him confused with the person who came up with the genophage, but Solarians don't live that long. So he's been the person who's been helping adapt the genophage to make, because over time the Krogan do develop an immunity through their own genetics. So they've had to recode the genophage. But yeah, he's very capable. He's definitely highly intelligent. He's pretty adaptable despite being very analytical. Sometimes you get characters that are very analytical, but they're not flexible. They don't have that out of the box thinking. He's always out of the box thinking. It's kind of his thing. But anyway, I would probably give him an A. He's just immensely versatile. I love his Incinerate and his Cryoblast. He's always a tech combo explosion ready to happen. He's not particularly squishy, and he aims well. He's got either the pistol or the SMG. Yeah, I definitely have him as an A tier. There's very few missions I could say that he hurts me.
I think he might be my one unquestionable S tier. I made a mistake. I'm going to give Morden an S. I am a huge fan of the character of Morden Solus. He's probably the one I find the most interesting. I find him endearing in some ways. I think he's another one who I might not like them if I met them, but I find him compelling enough that it completely counteracts that as a character. I think he goes through one of the most interesting arcs in the entire game. I think that wonderful thing where he never compromises who he is. I don't think Solarians live long enough to compromise who they are. By the time that their moral foundation is laid down, they grow, they do what they're supposed to do, and then they die. So he lives quite a straightforward life in that regard. But I really enjoy watching him grapple with the genophage, his role in that, and how sure he is of what was done and how right it was. And I'm talking about if we go all the way through his questline. Okay, so I want to do his questline all the way through, from start to finish, getting what you might call the best ending for it. He is the one person who genuinely seems to put a compelling argument behind the genophage idea. Plenty of people say it was fine, but they don't really defend it. They just talk about how necessary it was. He's the one who seems to duck into the nuts and bolts there. He justifies it to himself by saying that they weren't trying to even wipe them out. They did look for this middle ground that would allow the Krogan to live on, but would stop them either they go extinct or everyone else goes extinct. He saw it as this necessity. And you see that he doesn't really compromise himself as a person or his values. He just evolves over time from being with you, likely with Grunt, the purest of the Krogan in many ways, and then with Rex as well. And he comes organically. It never felt strange to me that he changed his mind. And it felt really true to who he was. So you've got a full, complete, and compelling character arc that felt true to who the character actually was. You saw how they started where they did. You see how they ended where they did. And they did something about it. It wasn't just some Pyrrhic victory where he realized, oh yeah, that was probably not a good idea. No, he got to the end and he undoes what he did. Again, depending on what we take him, but that's my canon. He undid what he'd done and decided to let the universe and life work itself out because he had this newfound faith in this other species. I just find him infinitely compelling. And when you think about his character quirks, like his scientist Solarian song, it's so good. And add to that he's just pretty damn good in a fight, which I didn't think. I think the first playthrough I probably never used him because he looks squishy. But like you mentioned, he is a tech combo just waiting to happen. And if you start using him efficiently,
yeah, sending him
one of the best.
With the scientists or the crew, I'm sure I keep calling them scientists, but sending him back with the crew to the Normandy always made sense to me. Like, why would I not send the STG agent? He always makes it just fine.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So for me, he's right up there in S right now.
Yeah, I'll be honest about my biases right away. I think of myself as a scientist. I am by trade an engineer, going to gravitate towards the science character, undeniably. He was immediately an S tier for me. And the reason I think he's an S tier for me is because he so encapsulates what I love about science. He has no real bias. He approaches every situation with, admittedly, the perspective of Solarians, but he's not concerned with the impact it has on Solarians. He's concerned with the impact it has on everyone. And he is absolutely willing to revert his previous conclusions based on new information. That's what makes science work. That's why scientists are constantly looking for new information. And Morden is the embodiment of that. And the arc he goes through with the genophage is the perfect example of that. He was convinced that it was necessary to curb the Krogan population, to control it, not eradicate it, for the protection of everyone. And as he learns more about the race that the Krogans kind of have become, because they're not the same Krogans that were causing the genophage to be considered, these are the Krogans after the genophage has ravaged their population. And he sees them, he gathers all of that data, and he realizes his previous conclusions were flawed. And he fixes them. There's no better arc for me than somebody who can acknowledge that they were wrong in something that they were passionately working towards, when they're presented with the evidence that it was wrong. And honestly, that scientist Solarian thing, I would put him at S+ if that were an option. It's wonderful.
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert, which I know is a tautology. My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.
He has a lot of little comments that when you have conversations with him. Like he mentioned one about like a sexually transmitted disease that only happens through Varen. He's like, ooh, implications are messy. Anyway, I don't have time to think about that right now.
He has very, very funny quick jabs like that.
He's always questioning, and he's never one to like be, like you said, he's objective to a fault sometimes, because even when he first boards the Normandy, Edie greets him and he says, oh, this can't be that, maybe it's this, maybe is this an AI? So he's still, even though he's probably 99% sure, he still has to ask. He needs that validation, and that's what Morden is. It's not a bad trait. He's just always questioning, and that just makes him that true scientist who's always asking the proper question, because you can't assume an answer. I think it happens organically with what you were saying, Banana, how he transitions over, because he still truly believes, even probably late in the game, that the original decisions were done correctly because of the parameters set in front of them. During your loyalty mission, you run across the female Krogan who died trying to help her people. Yeah. And so something clicks in his brain saying, yes, we might be right. The Solarians might be right. Everything we're doing is correct. However, it's creating atrocities, and now it's offsetting the good we may be trying to imply or trying to create. We're creating a race that is so desperate for an answer that they're killing themselves. And that is morally now questionable as far as what we're doing, where maybe it wasn't before, but now he has that extra parameter, that extra factor that he has to plug into the calculus of his brain of what is reasonable for a genophage. Is it necessary? Or should we just let evolution play it? Oh, he's questioning those, and he does not have an answer. So at that point is when it starts clicking. Maybe something different needs to happen. But I would challenge you guys. This is a challenge. I don't think you could do it. Renegade option for Morden at the end. Mass Effect 3. You have the option to take the Dalatras's offer and you kill Morden. So that way the Krogan believe that they have the genophage, but obviously it's not an overnight thing. So you actually have to kill him. So that's an option most people have not done.
I know it's there, and I think I've done it on one like completionist thing, but I can't. It feels there's so many layers to how wrong that is. So many. There's the political, there's the moral, there's the personal. I can't touch that.
I hate how it was done, though. Like I could do it if we fought over it. Like he's going to stand his ground. He is going to save these Krogan, but you can't let him have that. That would be great. But it's more like you just shoot him in the back. And it doesn't work.
I think that is the biggest reason why I couldn't. It's the coward's way out. It's to say I disagree with you, but I can't explain myself well enough to convince you, so I'll just kill you. And I can't justify that in my head ever. If your argument can't hold up to an intellect like Morden's, reevaluate your argument.
Yeah. That is 100% it, isn't it? It's the realization that you have to know that what you're doing is wrong. You have to know, because even Shepard in that moment can't come up with anything in their defense. I mean, Shepard is silver-tongued all the way through these games. And in this moment, you're left with one option, which is to shoot your friend. And that's all. It's a tacit admission that what you're doing is so vile, so misjudged.
Yeah, it sounds like the worst possible solution, but think about the real world consequences of it. You didn't have the guarantee of the Dalatrass that the Solarians would help. By doing this, you're able to secure their help, and by default, the Krogan, because they do believe that you've helped them.
I think that's one of those things that we've talked about my frustrations with before, is reality versus the perception of reality. I don't give a shit what people think. I give a shit what's true. And in that moment, you're not helping. You're pretending.
Let's not also forget that you do get some later repercussions with Rex as well. So it's really not a freebie. You pay a hefty price.
And that's absolutely what it is with that decision, is do you believe this enough to stand by it when you face the consequences?
Yeah.
And
No,
I don't think it's ever justified. Certainly not to the point where I am willing to tell people I shot a friend in the back to do this.
You know, I think as a point of admiration, Rex, who's always making comments about Solarians, even when he's not trying to be hostile, he's just, oh, Solarian liver. I prefer my Solarian cooked raw, or liver cooked raw, whatever he says. But he says that he's gonna name one of the kids after Morden, one of the females. So there's a female Krogan named Morden. I don't know. But, one of the absolute saddest part of the games does involve Morden. Not that section. It is pretty sad. He's going to count seashells on the beach. He wanted to do that. Didn't get to do it. He blew up. But when you do the DLC for the Citadel, you find his journal. His little voice message thing. And it plays back his memories, the things that he wanted to say. And he's come up with a script for a movie or play. No, it's a play. And it's so sad that you have all this, like, this guy who's so analytical, so focused on the mission and to keep the Solarian way of life that he's known alive. But he's also artistic. He's got a spiritual side to him. And to see that just unavailable in your DLC where you're celebrating the journey together, you can't do that with him. It's pretty sad.
Shepard, hope you're well. New mission on Tuchanka could end things. Made preparations. Asked friends in STG to leave this with you next time you were off duty. Some of my older work. Performances, stories, merely entertainment. But entertainment useful at times. Good luck. In prophase you see chromatins condensed to chromosomes. In metaphase their centromeres align to make new homes. In anaphase they separate, then telophase arrives. And when cytokinesis comes, two cells lead separate lives. Hello, Perry the Pyjack. Happy to be here. Science fun today, very respected. Education of youth vital for future. Now, children, science key to advancement, but can seem esoteric, indirect. Practical demonstration helps. Release the Varen. Native to Tuchanka. Dangerous predator, but can be incapacitated with common household chemicals. Observe. Wait, please move Perry the Pyjack away from Varen. Puppets similar to prey could trigger attack instinct. Problematic. Suggest going limp. Struggling counterproductive. Sedative should stop it. Or not. Not attacking. Mating instinct, of course. See, children? Key to science is testing hypotheses, making observations. Next hypothesis? Attempt neural shock. Neural shock clearly effective. Perry the Pyjack also clearly made of flammable material. Any questions? Glycine, valine, leucine, isoleucine, alanine. They all are aliphatic, so you will not see a ring. The lone human amino acid with one is proline. From protein we are formed. With 2 hydroxyl groups you'll find serine and threonine. For sulfur look to cysteine or to methionine. For bases you have arginine, lysine, and histidine. From protein we are formed. Now the aromatics! Tryptophan and tyrosine and phenylalanine. Aspartic and glutamic are both acids as we've seen. For amide C, asparagine, and also glutamine. From protein we are formed. Omega. Sky was color of VidCam tuned to a dead Vorcha. Business so bad that if Volus would have sold my suit. Then troubled Doppler shifted deep Asari blue as it came through my door. Likely Elcor father. High gravity adapted in all right places. Asari said Krogan thug after her business. If could get rid of him, said she'd be grateful for all eternity. Found Krogan in slums. First shot hit primary heart, but Krogan have redundant nervous system. Felt redundant, nervous myself. Krogan got me in stranglehold. Used incineration attack. Got lucky. Said this was an easy job, he gasped. Guess we've both been burned. Asari very grateful. Could read her like open book, and as it happened, did enjoy reading. In bed. Woke up looking at barrel of pearl-handled Carnifex. My M98 another room. Another Black Widow standing over me. Only loose end left, she said. Her mistake. Didn't know I'd been in STG. Learned tricks dirty enough to clog a Quarian soup filter. Your barrier's very similar to your morals, I said, and threw my biotic grenade. Warped. When woke up from explosion, Asari had fled back to Afterlife. Felt lucky not to be in Afterlife myself. Hadn't been paid, but considered self-fortunate. Had broken Omega's one rule, in more ways than one. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Maybe next time. Until then, we'll stick to patter songs.
And I think that's a wonderful moment that sort of sums him up and what really brings him to his ultimate conclusion and his ultimate redemption arc is the fact that he is, I try not to say the very model of a scientist Solarian, but there's no way around it. He is the very model of a scientist Solarian, but he also has that soul as well. And you hear it in that very, very fun rendition of the song. And then you see it personified by him adding in this moral aspect to his argument about the genophage. And then that having such enormous weight to the point where it's not just the numbers anymore. It is just the numbers, but he's added new numbers in. He's added new variables, meaning of life, the meaning for this people, what it means for your universe and for your values as civilization. And he's only in 1.25 games. And he leaves that impression. I wanted to add one small thing as well, which I think is really, it's beautiful game design, and it plays into his strengths. He has so many little dialogue lines, like you said about the STD that you could only have gotten from the Marin. That's it. The upgrades, if I remember correctly, are in his room for the ship. Mm-hmm. So you've got to keep going in there. You don't miss out on those little extra lines of dialogue. You don't always want to go down to the lowest level of the ship to go and see what's up with Jack or with Tally. But Morden, you're going to be going in there all the time. And it makes sense thematically. Of course, it's in the lab. But you have to keep going in there to get these upgrades, and you've always got a chance of hearing some Morden. So pretty much I think everyone who's played this game has heard all of his dialogue. Or at least all of his side dialogue. And I don't think that's true for every character.
Mm-hmm.
So much of his dialogues are contextual, but they're easy to follow. Like, for instance, like when he's talking to his apprentice who is working on the genophage cure, he has him at gunpoint. Morden is not upset at the fact that he's coming up with a cure, but it's how he's getting a cure. He's upset at the methods of everything. So Morden is extremely complex because they both have the same, well, they're diametrically opposed, him and his apprentice, of course, but Morden is more upset at his methods. So a true scientist.
Yeah, I feel like that moment where you see Morden as somebody who did something wrong for the right reasons, and his apprentice is somebody who's doing something right with the wrong methods. It's that two sides of the same coin, and it really shows you how far Morden could have fallen from who he is. It's so well done to showcase exactly why you are okay with him being on the ship, knowing his contribution to the genophage. It's not because he's an evil person. It's because he saw this as, and we're going to use this term incorrectly again, the most humane way to implement a solution.
Yeah.
He's not trying to be cruel. He's trying to be pragmatic. He's trying to find a solution that maybe doesn't feel right, but does provide everybody with the best outcome. And as he gains more information, recognizes that it wasn't really the best outcome. And he was wrong. And he takes that responsibility upon himself to rectify his mistake.
I can throw something on there as well with another misuse of a term. And it comes down to my experience going back into education as an adult, and now studying a science where I'd studied a humanities subject in the past. And I've got to say, when it comes to things like politics, I've heard some absolutely insane takes on it from people with scientific backgrounds. Really, really unpleasant. And it almost feels like you've never spoken to a person in your life. It's bizarre. Morden almost feels like those 19th century and 18th century scientists who were, it's not polyglot, I can't remember the polymaths, where they were well-versed in their sciences and also well-versed in the, here comes the misuse of the word, in the humanities as well. So he had that soul inside of him next to the scientist, and it just made him into this full and complete individual.
The Renaissance man.
Yeah, he's very much the Renaissance man. And I can't stop singing his praises. I really can't. He is probably my favorite character in the series.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That Morden showcases the flaw of utilitarianism. To say that the ends justify the means. That is inherently problematic because you won't ever know the ends. The ends justifying the means is defined by scope. So if you expand those results out through time, you'll never actually see the end result because time just keeps going. Then there's also the other element of that, as we see utility. There are elements of utility that aren't quantified. And again, the humanity of those decisions is to recognize that you cannot make a quantitative assessment of suffering or of psychological harm or of control. And Morden comes to that realization in the end to say, the numbers weren't wrong, the numbers were incomplete because we couldn't quantify this.
Did we... I've just suddenly had it come up into my head, and I think that means that it might have come up in a podcast before. But did we ever mention that moral philosophy program of if you have a whole city and that's a utopia, it's a perfect world, and everyone within that city is happy at all times and there is no suffering, but to power that city, one person chosen at random has to be tortured for all of eternity. Is it worth it?
I don't know if that was on an episode, but we've definitely talked about it.
Right? I think early Morden might have said it was worth it. I'm not sure at the end. I think he would be very much against it, to the point that he'd be going down to try and break that person out.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the Morden you meet at the end is the one to say, no, you can't justify an atrocity ever.
Yeah, and that's the word, the ever. I think for a second you might have been searching for another word, but you didn't need another one. Because that's him. You cannot justify this ever.
You know, one thing, he also criticizes Kirihi, not in a bad way. He says he's always throwing up those lines as, hold the line, hold the line.
Yes, but, not a Toto fan.
Yeah. So, you know, but he's it's interesting because he's coming at it not just to criticize Kirihi, but he's saying that's how Solarians think. They're very myopic with a lot of things, And he doesn't always gravitate to that. He's always like, there may be 20 different options. You have to explore all 20 different options. Taking the first option you have might get the results done, but is there a better way to do it? And so he's always got that, regardless of his, because he's always, I always think if we're talking about alignment, I don't mean to bring that up. I think that would be a great other podcast, but he is a chaotic neutral. We kind of like put.
I almost feel like he starts off as neutral.
A true neutral.
Straight up
A true neutral. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever that's called.
I think initially he is kind of the ultimate pragmatist. And he progresses to what I would consider more chaotic good. To say
I like that.
The idea is that I don't so much care about value to me in my decisions as much as general value, and there are certain lines I am no longer willing to cross because ultimately it is still value. He's just saying I now have a colossal figure on one side of this equation that's outweighing everything, and that is atrocity. And I will never find a factor that equates those two. It will always be imbalanced.
Well, he does gun down those Blue Sun mercenaries while he's at the clinic. He doesn't give them any justice. He just takes them out. And I could argue that it was the right decision. But that's why I don't put him in the good category. He does things sometimes, and his history has shown he's capable of pretty bad things and not even blinking from it.
But this is what we're saying, is he goes through genuine character evolution to the point where there is a moment, presumably, where that is no longer acceptable.
No, I think he would still gun down people that are coming into the clinic. I don't think that would ever change in any part of his progression of...
I don't know.
I
could imagine
with you.
I just don't know.
But I think that is a matter of perspective. To say, we see that as neutral because he's killing people. He's doing something awful. I feel like the way, and this is going to be a bit of a cop-out answer, I feel like in Morden's mind, he's still doing good. Because while I've said he can't justify an atrocity, he has presented these people with the option. They know what they're getting themselves into. They know they are attacking a facility that is helping people. And as much as he is, in his mind, a good person, there is that threshold where tolerating evil from others is not good. It's inherently evil by itself. And for him to, I would say, kind of adopt the responsibility to bear the burden of doing something evil, in his mind, is good. I'll deal with the consequences of this because I have the power to make sure no one else does.
There's also the idea with if we use the Genophage example in particular, he has damned Krogan simply for existing, simply for being Krogan. There is nothing about the unborn Krogan action that has provoked this result. Nothing. Whereas people attacking the clinic is a direct, in this world certainly, especially in that part of the world, it's a direct self-defense, proportionate action.
Yeah, but he does say it as much with his assistant. The assistant says, but you're a doctor. You're supposed to help people, not kill them. And he says, lots of ways of helping people.
Yeah, and I think this is what we're addressing about the idea of his character developing. That is very much who he is at the start. I think at the end he would probably still do it, but his reasoning wouldn't be probably quite as cold. And it would likely be very much informed by the self-defense principle.
I don't know. I mean, what if a Solarian or the Dalatros showed up right before the elevator? I think he guns her down.
Oh, I think he does. But I think in his mind, it's not the justification that this is the. I think in his mind at the end, the justification is, I'm going to bear this evil because it does good for other people. He doesn't see it as an inherently good action. He sees it as a necessary evil. And I think the version of Morden that we get at the end of the game will carry guilt from that. He'll never think he made the wrong decision, but he will regret that he couldn't find another solution.
There you go.
But I think also we've crossed wires, and we haven't really. We're not approaching the problem in a proportionate and related way. If you think about it, if the Danatras turns up at the elevator, yeah, I think he shoots her if she's got a gun.
Right.
And
That's
if
what I
she's
meant.
shooting him.
If there's a violent encounter.
In which case, it's still just in the self-defense parameter. If it's she turns up and says, I think you should probably rethink that, and then he just shoots her in the face.
Yeah, that
original Morden might have done that.
There's an urgency there. That's what I'm saying. That's why I give that example. He doesn't have time to have this argument. He doesn't have.
I don't think he would. I think he would push the up button on the elevator. And
Yeah. But if she has a gun or has a squad, he's going to take them out. He doesn't have time to have this conversation. He knows why they're there.
It's unfortunate that it has to come to this, but I don't have time to do this the right way because the consequences will happen if I take that time. So the only way I have to get the good ending is to take an unpleasant action now. And I definitely see that. I don't believe Morden is flawless at the end. I don't think he is the definition of justice or good. But I think he is a much better version of himself. And I think his motivations, his conclusions are all a bit more relatable as a result.
I can tell you what I don't think he is at the end, which he might have been at the start. I don't think he's a murderer anymore. I think earlier in the game, he'd have been much more inclined to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we've covered Morden pretty well.
Yeah. So you guys said S. I said A initially, but I mean, I just default to S. That's fine.
In prophase, you see chromatins condensed to chromosomes. In metaphase, their centromeres align to make new homes. In anaphase, they separate, then telophase arrives, and when cytokinesis comes, two cells lead separate lives.
Well, unfortunately, the Gamers Advocate dropped the ball and only gave me a B. Express your disgust with them in the comments and be sure to join the Discord and prevent further atrocities from happening in the future. At least they gave Jacob a bloody F. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you next time.